All right, hello. Can you please introduce yourself?
My name's Alan Somerville. I'm a fine art, printer, master printer, I guess, over the years, having printed for so many people, photographers and painters, managed to, keep a good business going for, supporting the artists, from early stage career to established, and it's nice to work with creatives on a day-to-day. Well, the printer here, it's a large inkjet wide format printer. It's an Epson printer. It prints using a pigmented based ink, which is rated to not fade for over 100+ years, with the combination of 100% archival papers. You're trying to achieve as close to those manufacturer estimates as possible. Most of the stuff that we produce is going to last our lifetime and then some, but that all assumes that you're going to have museum conditions. And most people aren't going to have that in their homes, but as long as they don't keep it in direct sunlight, and it's displayed properly as you would with any piece of artwork, then you're going to get as much longevity out as possible. In regards to the materials, it's all about trying to capture get the most archival properties to it. Longevity is the most important in our world, in the fine art side of it. If you were doing decor, you could be using a lot of more economy grade papers, and some ink, printers they might only last 5 to 10 years. So, from our point of view, because of the Epson and the tightness of the calibration between their products, we generally stick with Epsons, but we do print onto a variety of different substrates, different manufacturers. Hahnemuhle is a very popular one as well as Legion, or Moab has some. They're all just brand names in the end, and it's what we look at or focusing on is what are the ingredients that make up a true archival print, and that's the main thing. So it's not about the brand itself. It's a pigment on archival paper or pigment on an artist canvas, and those small words are what kind of translates over easier and simpler to the buyer. As Paul and Lisa are both painters, more often painters will gravitate more towards uncoated paper stocks. We also print onto canvas as well, so there are options to reproduce it back onto the same medium that the original was on. If the artist was a watercolor artist, they might lean more towards the textured, cold press papers. But the tests that I run off, the most common paper we use is a smooth 100% cotton paper. It's Epson's hot press. It's part of their premium line of papers, and it's 100% cotton, acid-free. The word giclée is always a hard one. It's a tongue twister for most people, but that's more of a decor word. Most people stay away from that just because of the fact that it actually describes the process, not the end product. Giclée means spray of liquids, and so it describes an inkjet printer. But where somebody, if in the decor world, when they don't quite know what they're talking about, or they're just selling them to more of a consumer market, they say, "Oh, would you like to buy a giclée?" Like it's the end product. So so anything in an inkjet printer is technically using a giclée process, but as I said, it's more about what properties you need to make it fine art. So when you're talking galleries and museum level, then the word giclée never really comes into play. There's some, it has some other connotations to it in French that I've been told that probably aren't as desirable either. So it's, and most people don't know that either. So, but in regards to the printers themselves, there are a variety of different printing processes. This is the Epson it uses a water-based paper, water-based ink, which is the pigmented ink. So there are solvent printers out there as well, but that's more in the signage printing industry, because they're usually looking for longevity outside under sun and in the environment. But for the inside of it, pigment is by far the best. When I started, dye-based inks were what we used to have in the past, and they maybe only lasted 5 to 10 years. And so we've adopted what used to be the sign printing outdoor realm, the pigmented inks, because they were the most archival for outdoor then, and that now is what the fine art properties are going forward for us. So, and then the Epson is probably the standard, the highest standard from a print quality point of view, mostly because they've been in it the longest. Hewlett-Packard and like Canon also have their own fine art level printers, but they just don't have the history of it, so there's less people that have those. More people who have desktop versions of those as opposed to the large format versions. Is it an open edition print or a limited edition print? So you were asking about limited edition. Limited edition in the old days, when it used to be done using an offset printing press, more lithographic process, they would be doing in the hundreds, if not thousands of prints, and those really weren't limited when you were limiting it to 500. Nowadays limited prints are generally single digits sometimes, maybe 10 to 20 at most. And because there's so much more competition out there for the sale, because now you can buy something from somebody across the world, you're having to make sure that your product is as exclusive as it can be, whether it's hand signed, hand and numbered by the artist, and in some cases some artists will paint on top of it afterwards to hand embellish it. And when you combine all those things, each reproduction becomes a unique reproduction in the end, and therefore it becomes even more special. Because you know that the artist was involved in the process, whereas if it was done in 500 or 1,000 or plus, there's a good chance the artist might have been involved in the testing stage of it, but they didn't sign it. They were all digitally signed, and at that point it's not really, as exclusive. There's a lot of artists out there who people will say are sellouts because they've sold through large retail chains, in the tens of thousands, and a lot of those pieces aren't worth any more than the frame that they were in. Because of the fact that they were just so mass produced. Whereas, most of the artists I'm working with, I'm trying to, if they're going to do limited, try to, keep it to a point where it's the most realistic chance to have it sell out. Because it's more important, I think, in the long term to have something sell out as opposed to still be there 5 years from now. And then the stuff that you're creating 5 years from now, it's going to be competing against that. You want that incentive for somebody to buy sooner. It has to have a scarcity element to it, and that's always important. We specialize in fine art, but there's a lot of people who want to get that next level printing, beyond, say, going to linen drugs, right? But with the proofing side of it, I think that's what separates Fidelis from other places, is that we will go that extra mile to test it and sometimes retest it 2, 3, 4 times to get to the point that the colors match the original as close as possible. If it's a photographic image, like from a photographer, there is no original to go by, and it's really just what we see on the screen. If we're looking at trying to match something that's from their screen to my screen, there's always variations between it, so we always run the test first, and that the test is the finished product, so we always want to test based off of that. With the artist original, that like what we have right now with Paul and Lisa, we have the original right here, so we can run it off. I ran a few tests before today, or earlier, that I showed Paul and Lisa this morning, and it got their some quick opinions on how the colors were. I'm going to run probably the first line of testing. I'm going to make some judgments to try and get it closer to it, but the final corrections are usually going to be guided by the client, which for me is the artist. And at that point, some of them may, in the absence of the original, they may want it to be slightly different. They may want it to be slightly darker, a little more punchier in saturation, because at a smaller size, maybe it needs to stand out a little bit more on the wall. But that's all based on their direction, I offer some guidance, but at the same time, in the end, it's their. I want to make sure that when they go to sell it, that they're confident with the end product, and therefore people see that when you're trying to sell it, is that if the artist is, oh, these are just not quite as good as they could be, the person's going to catch in on that, and they're going to realize it, and to the point where they might lose the sale because of that. And that's where, from a beginner artist to a more experienced, to somebody who's gone through it, tried it on their own, and now gradually came to Fidelis to get the professional photography done, professional printing done. It's a step up from what they maybe can do on their own. And photography is great if you're doing it for Instagram, and you're just documenting it to show on social media. But if you're trying to shoot it to get it onto printing, the lighting has to be controlled. We have a controlled environment here that allows us to maintain the color between a set of images. We have 4 images here, all very large pieces. But once we get it into the computer, there's probably 10-15 minutes of post-production in Photoshop to remove specular highlights from brush strokes, from reflections from the lighting, to just smooth out or balance the lighting, because there's sometimes fall off on the tops and the bottom because the lighting just doesn't spread far enough to cover a big piece like the ones we have here. So it really just, as I said, it's not a long process. Usually it's done over a couple days, because they'll bring the original in, come back a few days later, once the original's been shot and tests are ready to see. And then once the tests are done and the file is digitally mastered, then the good part about the process is that it's print on demand. So you don't have to print 50 or 100 prints. Like, if you're doing open edition, yeah, you might be doing that many if you were going to an art market, because you'd want to have some inventory there. But if you were doing limited edition and larger prints that maybe could cost you a few $100s a piece production cost, and you're maybe selling it for $500 to $1,000, you don't want to carry the inventory of printing the entire edition all the way through. So at that point, technically the artist shouldn't be out of pocket any money, because they can run promote the piece through the gallery, through their own social media connections, and then when the order comes in, they're getting paid up front from the client for the print, and they're using that money to pay for the cost of the production. So yeah, there are some volume breaks if you printed out an entire edition, but the cost of carrying that inventory isn't necessary, and sometimes is not the best way to utilize the budgets you have at hand. Well, there's a lot of pieces. Paul was mentioning he has some pastels that he wanted to bring in, charcoal. We hope that the piece has been prepared, or at least coated in some form or fashion, so that it's not super vulnerable. Wear gloves where needed. More often than not, we're handling it as carefully as it would be as if it was my own piece. Photography's my side of the world, but I do get into doing some of, when I get into doing some of my own stuff, you want to make sure that you're treating it, properly with the utmost care and attention. And when it comes to the detail of it, handling it and, going through the process, it's really not a lot different than something that's just an simple abstract. It's, because every piece has to be shot at that same level of quality. The benefit of a really big piece is that, if you were going to print larger, the reproduction is going to scale up better. But if you were going to take an 8x10 original and scale it up to a 30x40, the enlargement factor is going to be a little bit different there.